Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. My name is Josh Norris, here with Ian Hartitz, John Daigle. Gentlemen, how are we in this midweek episode?
I'm doing great, Josh. I don't know about John.
Ian, I feel like you're always great. Like, do you have, I've seen a couple moments where you do express frustration, but overall, you seem like...
Office construction will get him.
Overall, I think you're a very, very happy person.
Hey, man, it's always a great day to be great. Don't be afraid to be great.
Happy? I figured I was the happier one than him. He's just more like lackadaisical. Like, he just kind of coasts. Like, he's very carefree, and I like that about him.
There's a lot of things in life we don't need to worry about that people worry about anyway.
So today is a different type of Wednesday episode. I totally agree with that, by the way. Let's not make our lives more complicated than they are. This is a one-off. You know, we're 8 weeks plus through the NFL season. Why not take a look at the season so far for basically every single team? Think about how each team is doing in this current moment, and then looking forward as well. 8 weeks, 8 games for many of these teams is a lot. And how we're going to structure this is we're going to look at the playoff pictures for the AFC, the teams that are still in the hunt, then go to the teams most likely out of it, and then do the same thing on the NFC side. Ready to get into it, boys?
Let's do it.
We're ready.
All right, let's start off with the 1 seed. That is the New England Patriots at 8-0. The Patriots' window to win has been endless so far in 10 plus years of existence of Bill Belichick and Tom Brady working in unison. But what has stood out to you, Ian, so far this season, and how they've won football games compared to maybe how they've done it in the past?
It's the best version of the Patriots defense we've ever seen somehow, and it's happening in the offensive golden age, which is just that much more ridiculous. Their defense has scored 5 touchdowns this year. Their defense has allowed 4 touchdowns this year. It's week 9. Like, this is absolutely insane. Like, you can pull up any metric. They're number 1, but I think the one thing is just they are shutting down the pass like no other. Like, literally, they're averaging 3.9 net yards per pass attempt this year, 4.6 yards per carry. You're literally better off running the ball against the Patriots than trying to throw it.
And well, not only their defense, but they're doing this with pieces coming in and out of the lineup in their offense. Like, they lose Josh Gordon, it doesn't matter. They have Antonio Brown. We're going to forget in a couple years that Antonio Brown even played one game. And not only played, but they force-fed him to get him involved in this one game. It just doesn't matter what happens. Sonny Michel still hasn't caught a single ball with Rex Burkhead healthy, but then they just throw him in the lineup and get him to catch passes whenever Burkhead's out. It's just... they continue rolling. They're the number 1 team for a reason every single year.
We know the defense is historic so far, but we also have talked about prior to the season that defenses that are historic, it's difficult for that to be sticky year over year. Is it going to be possible for the Patriots to do that from game 1 to game 19 when they possibly win the Super Bowl? That's a major question for me, because so far this offense is unspectacular. It really is. And like you mentioned, Ian, it is a different identity this team has this year. But I do feel like, and going back to your point, Daigle, how they are understanding and self-evaluating this offense as it goes along. It's been imperfect so far. And honestly, it might only get better from here on out, because you have missed Isaiah Wynn at left tackle. You had the Josh Gordon, Antonio Brown situation where there were no names or receivers or options pass catching the ball outside of Julian Edelman, and then you go and spend a second-round pick on Mohamed Sanu. In the end, we think they can figure it out on offensive side of the ball because of Tom Brady, right?
I just don't.
They always do.
Right, yeah. They always do.
Even if they don't, it doesn't matter. They're still going to be playing for a Super Bowl. So
it's such an odd, and they haven't played anyone that much in the first half of the season, but it is so difficult to bet against this team as we go on through the final.
So they hit their bye week 10, and then the quarterbacks they play the rest of the year, if you want to try to gauge their defense. After the bye, Carson Wentz, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, probably Patrick Mahomes, Ryan Finley, Josh Allen, and Ryan Fitzpatrick or Josh Rosen. So it gets a little bit tougher, but it doesn't matter. You're still starting them every single week.
This little cloud, though, of Brady 2020 may not being on the Patriots is getting more interesting each and every week.
The correct voices,
Tony Romo's?
Yes, yeah. The correct voices are saying, the only people that are saying he could play elsewhere are the people you trust. That's why it rings.
All right, let's go.
Hold on,
go
real
ahead.
quick though. Like at the end of the 2017 season, we had story after story about the dysfunction between Belichick, Brady, and Kraft, and then they just go and win our Super Bowl. And it's like, oh no, they're actually as good as ever. So.
But it's not dysfunction this year, though. It's more or less like Brady leaning towards a different direction.
Well, Tom Curran, who I really trust and works at NBC Sports Boston, said he expects Brady to go look elsewhere, but then ultimately come back to the Patriots.
That's
And I think that's
the most reasonable take I've heard. Yeah,
I'm just saying, I'm old
take.
enough to remember when Jimmy Garoppolo was apparently the guy driving apart the Patriots dynasty.
Well, look, if Tom goes to San Francisco, then where's Jimmy going to go? Back to New England. All right, when I was putting this and planning this podcast together, I had no idea prior to making this list who the number 2 seed is as we look at the full screen here for the standings. Well, now I do because I did the work. But at the time, I was like, holy crap. The Indianapolis Colts
the
are
actual
currently
seed.
the
I didn't know
second
until you said
seed
it.
in the AFC at 5-2 right now. And all you have to go is go look back at August 24th, right? That August night during the third preseason game of the Indianapolis Colts, and Andrew Luck retires basically mid-game, holds this spectacular press conference at the end, and at that point, we had no idea what to think of this Colts team. Again, now they're 5-2 with narrow wins of a margin of 2, 3, 6, 7, and 2 points. But Ian, so far through these 7 games, the Colts are getting it done.
It's because you have the NFL's best offensive line, I think. I mean, if there is a team where you could lose your starting quarterback a week or two before the season and survive, I think it's the Colts. I mean, PFF just came out with their midseason rankings. They are saying the number 1 offensive line. We all know Quentin Nelson's amazing, but Anthony Costanzo, I mean, I think he deserves to be mentioned among some of the league's very best tackles as well. And, you know, Jacoby Brissett has actually put up numbers in the first half of the season. I don't know if he's going to be a consistent top 10 fantasy quarterback, but the guy at least makes a handful of plays a game that puts them in position to win, as we've seen. I mean, he had a play last week to get them down in field goal range.
Oh, my gosh.
Free rushing Von Miller, avoids him, rolls out, and hits T.Y. Hilton on a line with Chris Harris right in his hip pocket about 40 yards downfield. So, you know, I didn't know how good Jacoby was before this season. Again, I still don't know if he's an elite quarterback, but at the very least, you know, he's good enough to lead them on a nice little playoff run.
We know those one-score games regress from year to year, and that's why Warren Sharp was the one harping this past year that the last 20 years, the Colts were the only team to hold a lead going into the fourth quarter and still win out of those games 4-5. And now we're slowly seeing those one-score games regress. Coaching definitely helps. Like Frank Reich is the reason they are winning these close games, not by making dumb decisions. Even this past week, no coach challenges a DPI, like a defensive penalty, and yet he challenged one and then won. Like he's just doing all the right things.
It is, and your point to what Jacoby Brissett did, that 35-yard dime on the sideline to T.Y. Hilton, I believe, going out of bounds. I think in order for the Colts to sustain the success, they will have to have Jacoby Brissett make plays on an individual basis. But outside of him, I'm not sure where the playmakers are. Like, we talk about how good this defense is in moments, and last year more so than this year, because, in fact, this year it's been below average. I don't see really any playmakers defensively. Offensively, I mean, Marlon Mack is more of a volume runner than big play runner. And other than T.Y. Hilton, none of those passing options scare you completely. And that would worry me as the Colts go along right now, again, at 5-2. But then I look at their schedule. It's the Steelers, it's the Dolphins, and it's the Jaguars in the next 3. Very conceivable they start the season 8-2.
I don't know if the defense is ever going to be this like top 5 unit, one of the true difference-making units, but they were without Malik Hooker and Darius Leonard, who might be their top 2 playmakers for a stretch. So I do think they are going to get better as the season goes on.
And the guy that we thought was going to emerge as their number 2 without Devin Funchess, Deion Kane, was just simply healthy scratch this past week.
Zach Pascal.
It led Zach Pascal to run a season high, 92% of snaps, 34 routes, I believe. So he's now their number 2. But again, who knows Zach Pascal?
Wonder if we see Paris Campbell getting involved at all this season.
It'll go up.
First snaps, I think, this past week.
First game back from his abdomen was this past week, so I think they'll slowly kind of get Chester Rogers a little bit out of the rotation. Their best 3 wide receiver set is Hilton, Pascal, and Campbell with Eric Ebron out there.
Yes.
I look at this, though, with a very, very good division in terms of the Texans and Jags being very competitive and just a close games behind. We'll get to them in a moment. The other team that's 5-2 right now in the 3 seed because of the AFC North is the Baltimore Ravens. We've talked about this, it seems like, each and every week, but it's worth repeating. This is a very different team than the ones we are accustomed to in the Ravens of the past. This is an offensive football team. The defense right now, so far, has been below average. And it's a total departure from that history of the Ravens. And it's all because of the 32nd overall pick a few drafts ago in Lamar Jackson. And he's the absolute heart of the team, and they win and lose because of Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, and this week is tough. It's Sunday in particular against the Patriots. But they've done this without really even getting their running backs involved in the passing game. Like Justice Hill has been a non-factor. Mark Ingram's run the 36th most routes among running backs, only has 12 catches through 7 games. And it's not like they're going to change that. They just haven't shown any interest. They're doing it basically with only Lamar Jackson as their main running back and quarterback, Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews when he doesn't drop the ball.
When Lamar came into the league, we were like, this guy could be the next Michael Vick as a rusher. And that's exactly what he has been. He's averaging a league-high 6.9 yards per carry. Very nice. And look, in NFL history, there's only been 2 instances of a quarterback averaging over 70 rushing yards per game. Lamar Jackson last year in his 7 starts, and Lamar Jackson this year. He's at 82 yards per game. This just doesn't happen. Vick's best season ever was 65 rushing yards per game. You know, you can say his was more electric or whatever. I won't disagree with you there, but like truly, we are witnessing the most productive rushing quarterback ever.
I do think in some ways the Seahawks' victory is somewhat shaping our view of the Ravens so far this season, right? Because they had an easy start with the Dolphins and the Cardinals, easy games for Lamar to put up ridiculous production. Then a difficult stretch against the Chiefs and the Browns, and lost both those. Then again, Steelers, Bengals, very easy victories, or should have been. Meanwhile, the Seahawks, we saw that Lamar has that ability in just his 2nd season as a starter to take control of games. And while Seattle's defense is not what it was either, you still had Lamar in individual moments, 3rd and somethings, 4th and goals, that he was the one leading this team to victory. I just hope that that is sustainable. That is something, because when the entire weight of the team is on one person's shoulders, especially in their 2nd year at quarterback, when he is a unique player at that position, because this, to me, is one of the most fun teams in the NFL. It's
good to have your best player on the team, though, touch the ball every play.
And I imagine
that is true.
I imagine we'll dissect this matchup, his toughest matchup to date, on the next podcast.
Yeah, and the Patriots one, I'm sure we will during the preview episode, but I do want to bring up this nugget that the Patriots, along with the Lions last year, were the team, and in many other cases with other teams, they were the ones to make the blueprint to beat the Rams and how to shut down that offense. That Rams offense is very different than this Ravens one. But I also believe that Bill Belichick has the ability to come up with a certain defense to at least put in check an opposing offense, and then other teams copy that. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens this weekend. The Ravens are averaging over 30 points per game, 435 yards per game, both the best marks in franchise history. And I do want to touch on the secondary for a moment, because they added Marcus Peters, obviously Earl Thomas this offseason. Marlon Humphrey can be one of the best young corners in the NFL.
Jimmy Smith should be back this week, too.
I think that as we move on, if that defense becomes a little more stable, that secondary can be that piece to add some playmakers on that side of the ball, to have them create some big plays in pivotal moments, like we always talk about with defenses that are below average.
Yeah, only question I have with them is, like, will they have that front 7 that can kind of stand up against the ground? And we see the best defense in the league are better against the pass than the run, because, you know, you can always just kind of add bodies to the box and deal with it that way. But I don't know. I feel like in the AFC, you always got to go back and look at how do they match up against the Patriots, and I don't know. I feel like they're still a couple pieces away, because let's face it, they still have Flacco's contract in the salary cap. I mean, the fact they're doing any of this is incredible, because they're not getting the usual benefit of having a quarterback on their rookie contract where they can spend elsewhere.
Does this team need Marquise Brown to get back to his first 2-week form in order to be a true contender?
They need him healthy. 100% they need him healthy. I mean, he's their number 1 wideout, and we saw when he's out, it's Mark Andrews, and that's it. Miles Boykin is kind of a non-factor right now, just because Lamar Jackson still struggles throwing to the outside. So, yeah, they absolutely have to have him back 100%.
Yeah, should be back this week, so
yes.
We'll see.
And there's a difference between winning by paper cuts, which his team is built to do, and then create the big play. And so far, Lamar has been the one to create the big play since Marquise Brown has been out with those injuries. All right, the 4 seed currently, the Kansas City Chiefs at 5-3. The Chiefs have now lost 3 of 4 games, and those 3 losses have been to the Indianapolis Colts, the Houston Texans, and the Denver Broncos. All 3 losses are at home, and they aren't losing because of the quarterback. I don't even think last week. Did I say the Broncos? I meant the Packers were one of those losses. Anyways, because Matt Moore played well against the Packers. So my, I guess, suggestion here is I do worry about this defense, because on paper it's a better defense than it was last year, but on the field it certainly hasn't been so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, the one big issue last week, and I know you kind of pointed this out on Twitter right when it happened, didn't have Chris Jones, didn't have Frank Clark. Darren Lee is, dealing with an illness thing. So I think at full strength, their defense can be good. Like, we actually, in terms of DVOA rank and stuff like that, like, they were trending towards being a nice little average defense where in years past we've seen them kind of rank towards the bottom of the league. And that's all they need to be. When you got a healthy Patrick Mahomes eventually, as long as you're just an average defense and not getting absolutely blasted every week, that's fine. But they need to get healthier. They need to be able to control that line of scrimmage for that to happen.
Yeah, they're still top 5 in sacks at least, but still, it's with Frank Clark on the field. He was kind of a non-factor, as you said. He's just been invisible pretty much. So once everyone is healthy, I would imagine it's better. And with Patrick Mahomes back under center, we probably don't even have this conversation. Like, they are the one team, he's the one player who we know can take the Patriots, even if it's a blizzardy, like 20 degrees, whatever, negative 20 outside. Like, he took them to overtime in the playoffs. Like, we know what they can do.
But isn't that exactly what we said last year? And then they weren't able to do it. And then they spent their offseason trying to be in a position where they didn't have to have that one stop at the end of last year, adding Frank Clark, adding Tyrann Mathieu. They've improved this roster, yet I'm not even sure if I'm as confident in this team now as I was in the 2018 version of the Chiefs.
I just hate saying they didn't do it because it all comes back to that atrocious offsides call on D Ford.
Yeah.
They did do it.
They did, but they didn't.
I mean, nothing has changed my opinion on that team.
Well, I mean, but to your point, Ian, that goes back to one individual play, right?
You can pick and choose a lot.
Yeah, you can pick individual plays, but they went into this year hoping to not rely on those 1 and 2 or 3 plays per game. They wanted to then beat teams by 10 points, by 14 points, which is very difficult to do, but their offense was able to do that each game. It was a defense bringing them down. And so far, and maybe, again, we're only halfway through the season. This is kind of a reset that we're doing today. They have the pieces that are better than last year, but so far it hasn't come together in order for them to kind of have that mindset that they were hoping to have.
I think getting Tyreek Hill fully back and in this offense is just going to be absolutely huge. I mean, I wouldn't call him the best wide receiver in the league, but I think he is potentially like the most influential offensive weapon just in terms of the things he makes defenses have to account for.
And I know Mahomes has missed basically 2 games, but 15 passing touchdowns for Mahomes at this halfway point compared to 50 passing touchdowns.
It's almost like touchdown regression is a real thing.
I mean, oh gosh.
No, I'm not saying he's playing worse, Ian.
I'm not saying he's playing worse either. It's just touchdown regression is clearly like a real thing.
We were making that, we were like mocking that point after like 3 weeks when he threw, let's see, 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns.
I don't think we were mocking it. We were like, this is good, but I still think it's going to. Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
It is surprising that he's gone 0 touchdowns, 1 touchdown. Yeah, so.
And his worst play is still, like, you take it over any other quarterback in the league. Like, his worst play is still the best in the league, which is why I don't think, it's interesting to talk about, but I truly don't think any of this matters come playoff time as long as they're in. Once they get in, then all bets are off.
Also stood out to me looking at the numbers that LaShawn McCoy is basically doubling up Damian Williams so far this season.
It's been a complete non-factor, Damian Williams. And so it's an interesting one, though, moving forward. Like, Damian Williams was droppable literally until that end of the third quarter when LaShawn McCoy fumbled. 13 touches to Damian Williams 0 at that point, and then suddenly Damian Williams 7 touches to LaShawn McCoy 0 to finish the fourth quarter.
And he looked really good. Like, I've not seen Damian look better.
That was playoff Damian Williams. Exactly. That was final 4 games of the season Damian Williams, yes.
All right, the 5 seed
we can
currently,
still kill our shares, though. They're done.
The first of the wild card teams is the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are 5-2. Their 2 losses have been to good football teams, the New England Patriots and the Philadelphia Eagles. Tell us how, Daigle.
That's why I'm asking. It's not rhetorical. It's like, even if you look at advanced metrics like your estimated points, like the Bills aren't even in the top 20 in the league. It seems like that sneaky Tyrod Taylor Bills team or Nathan Peterman Bills team, whatever you want to say, that snuck into the playoffs against the Chargers, and yet they shouldn't have been there whatsoever. That's kind of what they're doing. They've done it without Devin Singletary, really, too. They're still leaning on Frank Gore, even though moving forward for fantasy in particular, Devin Singletary played nearly 70% of the snaps in week 1, got injured the next week, came back limited a little bit on 33% of the snaps, and then this past week, 68% of the snaps again. Singletary will never be the 10-plus carry guy that Frank Gore is. But if he's getting over 5 targets a game, he's still a flex play every single week because he's that explosive. But he's not the reason why
I'm kind
they're
of
5-2.
stunned that we're talking so much about this running back situation
Because I don't know what else. So how are they 5-2? Their defense has been amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's their secondary specifically. I mean, only the Bears and Patriots have gone longer without allowing a 300-plus yard passer. This goes back to week 1 of last season. I mean, their secondary, Tre'Davious White, stud. Levi Wallace playing well. Teron Johnson, like they have, and now Edmonds, their middle linebacker, truly one of the better.
Poyer's still one of the best safeties in the league. Yeah.
All three, like their one missing piece from last year was, oh my gosh, long-time defensive tackle. He was there forever. Kyle
Williams from LSU.
My bad. And they replaced him with Ed freaking Oliver, a top 10 pick. So like truly, they've had this great continuation.
Quiet.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like the one piece they had to replace, they were able to replace it with the top 10 talent. So it's not surprising to me how good their defense has been. And we've seen Josh Allen take little steps forward, which, hey, he has good receivers.
And then a big stride back. But that is the Josh Allen roller coaster. And, there was a moment on this podcast when I talked about that. I don't care if Josh Allen is good. I don't care if Josh Allen is bad. I am enjoying the Josh Allen entertainment factor and the roller coaster. But it is a legitimate question to ask if this team can be a real contender, because that's what this whole conversation is, right? Not only can they get to the playoffs, because I think this Bills team can get to the playoffs, but can they really win the whole thing? And can Josh Allen put things together even to like the degree that Joe Flacco did when they won the Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens? Can he have that sustained success for a 3 or 4 game stretch for this team to win the Super Bowl and to play mistake football in those 3 or 4 games? And I don't think it's in Josh Allen's identity to do that. And I think that's very, very concerning long-term here for the Bills.
Yeah, I think their best case is he puts together good 4 quarters and they can snipe like one playoff win. Maybe they get a wild card game at home, but yeah, I don't see them sustaining it over a long time.
And what if John Brown goes down? Are they just going to plug in Robert Foster and then think it's going to be Robert Foster and Cole Beasley? No.
Robert Foster's really good.
This team is already scoring fewer than 20 points per game this season. 20 points per game. 20 points should be, for every single playoff team, at least the bottom point scored total every single game this season, right? This team is averaging less than that, and they're 5-2. And the schedule as we go along, the Redskins, the Broncos are the road games, the Browns and the Dolphins as the home games. Excuse me, that's the opposite. Redskins, Broncos at home, Cleveland and Miami on the road.
I thought we were going to have Josh Allen throwing an elevation.
That's an easy next 4-game schedule. I mean, they could easily be 9-2.
So the question is, can they win it all? And to win it all, they have to beat the Patriots, obviously. And we saw them play the Patriots. Josh Allen really needs to cut. The interceptions are fine. I don't even care. He needs to cut down the fumbles, first of all. And I still have it embedded in the back of my brain because I know we're all going to rush to rewatch that game if they do reach that point. And if you remember, after they came out of the first half, they went no huddle on their very first drive the entire second half, and they just walked. They marched down the Patriots' throat. So it's like, okay, maybe they remember that. They probably don't, but maybe they remember that, and they go no huddle for the entire game if they run into the Patriots again. Right. But at last, we have to last 8 more weeks to see that, perhaps.
The one thing that worries me about Buffalo really is I do think they're one of the few teams that are a lot better at home, and I don't see them getting the home field advantage throughout the playoffs.
Yeah.
I know some people love DVOA and some people dislike it, but the Bills are 25th overall in DVOA.
Yeah.
I mean, and they're 5-2.
I know.
It's wild. Wow. The final wildcard spot in the AFC side, the 6th seed, are the Houston Texans at 5-3. Recently, bad news for the Texans that J.J. Watt is out for the season. Ian, can it just be boiled down to, hey, if Deshaun Watson has a great game, they can win this week. If he has a poor game where he doesn't hit those 3 big plays per game, they might lose.
Yeah, he needs to play like perfect for them to win almost every week. I mean, it's pretty wild now not having Will Fuller out there. I mean, he's had really brutal splits throughout his career with Will Fuller in and out of the lineup. I don't think we're going to, kind of last week we already saw those not persist because Kenny Stills is such a better field stretcher than Demaryius Thomas and DeAndre Carter. These guys, they've been trotting out there in recent years. The one guy I would just, please give him the ball. What has Duke Johnson done to the NFL?
You're not getting it.
To get this?
We're not getting it.
Every week Ian comes on this podcast and asks the question.
1st in yards per carry, 7th in yards per reception, 2nd in yards per touch. The guy is 1st in yards after contact per attempt, yet we got people screaming from the mountaintops he's not a 3-down back. I've watched the film. He's a 3-down back. He can run inside. Oh, man. All right, Lamar Jackson, Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs. Those are the guys breaking tackles at a higher rate than Duke Johnson this season.
But isn't it surprising that Carlos Hyde is over 4 yards per carry so far this year?
He's fine. He is a good, strong inside runner. He will get what's there. He might even fall forward for an extra
Maybe you should write a blurb because we know Bill O'Brien reads Rotoworld from that, what was the HBO show, Hard Knocks?
Yes.
Yes, he was on Rotoworld. So
So, speaking of Bill O'Brien, as someone watching it from the outside, it's been mildly entertaining because he is going all in as the de facto general manager right now. We know about the Larry Tunsil trade. We know about the Kenny Stills trade. We know about the Duke Johnson trade. We know about the Gary and Conley trade. And this is someone who believes in this roster. And that's debatable if he should. But this is also someone that if a player has a bad week, you're gone. And we're just going to replace you with another player and not look towards the future at all. Does that tell us something of if the Texans don't make the playoffs this year, that Bill O'Brien is frightened for his job, or is this just his mentality of a coach in a authoritative role that's also on top of the roster right now?
I cannot imagine Bill O'Brien as a forward thinker. So, and I don't know that personally, but all the moves we've seen him make, his coaching style too, he's not really someone who looks 8 games. He doesn't look in 2020, 2021. So they're clearly playing to win now, and they've created a top-heavy roster that now, without J.J. Watt, it falls backwards a whole lot.
He's just playing Madden franchise mode, and he has no intentions of playing beyond year 1.
All right, let's now look at the teams still in the playoff race. Again, those were the top 6 seeds right now. There are a number of teams in the AFC that are still able to reach one of those 6 spots. We'll start off with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are 1 off right now at 4-4. Just imagine if you were a Jaguars fan heading into this season. For years and years and years, your team had shown undying love to a quarterback, in quotes, in Blake Bortles, right? Then you finally take a splash in free agency and sign Nick Foles to a boatload of money after he made magic happen with the Philadelphia Eagles. Then Nick Foles goes down very early in the first game, and you are endowed, you are given this magic, this mystic player in Gardner Minshew, who, to me, Ian, has looked like a quality starter in the NFL. He's already hit some down moments, some hiccups, namely that Saints game. But for the overwhelming majority of time, I don't understand why anyone can look at Gardner Minshew and say, hey, he doesn't give us something that, or he gives us something that Nick Foles, he can't offer the same thing that Gardner's showing so far.
He's so good off script, and we saw that dating back to the Broncos game earlier in the season. We saw it last week. It's been all year. Like, just the guy gets outside the pocket, and defenses can't handle him because he keeps his eyes downfield. But his rushing is like kind of going under the radar. Like, he's, I think, literally, Lamar Jackson has more rushing yards on scrambles, and then it's Gardner Minshew. Like, he's one of, I think, 4 quarterbacks over 200 rushing yards this year. It's something else the defense needs to account for that Bortles also brought to the table to an extent, but I feel like Bortles more like when he broke the pocket, he was kind of gone. It was, I'm going to throw or I'm going to run. Minshew actually forces the defense, similar to Josh Allen, like, even if it's not always the most effective on a play-by-play basis, defenses need to account for every square inch of the field with Minshew under center, which, as we've seen, opens things up for Leonard Fournette, opens things up for Chark, Westbrook. They're gelling, and I don't know how you can really put Foles back under center at this point.
Foles has a $22 million cap hit next year, $33 million in dead cap space if they don't get rid of him or if they just cut him outright. But when you have Minshew on your own terms, on a free 5-year rookie contract, like, how could you have looked at his performance thus far and said that's not worth writing on a team-friendly deal for the next year? It is insane if they go back to Foles after their bye in Week 11. Having said that, I think they go back to Foles in Week 11.
Really? I really don't think you can.
I hope they don't. I really don't. I really hope they don't.
I mean, I think the biggest compliment you can pay Gardner Minshew is that he has changed the entire mindset of the Jaguars in terms of what they want to do offensively, right? For the past 2 off seasons, it was, hey, let's add offensive line talent. Let's run Leonard Fournette into the back of our offensive line.
It leads the league in routes run
for 25, for 25 times a game, and then let's just bank on our good defense to try to be great each and every season. Now you have Leonard Fournette, who's still getting volume, who's running more routes though, but in those critical moments, which you have to have if you're a below-average team, and I would say that with the Jaguars.
Sure.
You have Gardner Minshew is the one that's carrying them out of those holes. You have him showing comfort in chaos. You have him, like this past weekend, being comfortable in the face of disruption and finding a real chemistry with someone who J.J. Chark, who this team drafted to run in a straight line quickly down the field and then run block. I mean, he has changed the scope and the dynamic of this team, and there isn't a bigger compliment you can pay to a player.
DJ Chark on pace for 78 catches, 1,320 yards, and 12 touchdowns on 122 targets.
This team, I think, is a little dangerous.
They need secondary help in a bad way. Josh Allen has been great in rushing the passer, but they still need someone on the back end.
And that's why I totally agree with you. But that's why, to me, they are a little dangerous because Josh Allen has been good.
Yes.
Yannick Ngakoue, they need to pay him as well so they don't run into a Jalen Ramsey type situation. But it's a very competitive division, as we talked about. And I think the Jaguars are going to be competitive, maybe an 8-8, 9-7 season as we go along.
It's the division to be competitive in.
All right, the other team right after them, Tennessee Titans at 4-4. What a season it's already been for the Tennessee Titans. And I think it can be boiled down to this. Marcus Mariota, who was selected number 2 overall, who this team had stood by, they now shifted to Ryan Tannehill. And Ian, this team has just looked better offensively with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback easily.
Yeah, but I still think this is Derrick Henry's offense. It's Derrick Henry's team. We've seen that from day one. Only Henry, Chris Carson, Dalvin Cook, Fournette, Chubb, and McCaffrey have at least 15 touches in our team's game this season, and I think the eruptions are about to come a lot. Like I can see Henry putting together something similar to we saw last year because this is what he does. He starts grinding defenses when they don't want to play anymore, when it's getting cold and late in the season. For his career, he's averaged 3.87 yards per carry in September and October, 4.9 in November, 5.23 in December, and 4.98 in January. So we've seen this happen his entire career. It makes sense intuitively, I think. And yeah, he's going to keep getting the ball, and I think defenses aren't going to want to tackle that monster.
I just really think they need to instill A.J. Brown as the true number 2 receiver as opposed to giving Tajay Sharp.
I would say the true number 1 wide receiver.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, that's fine. But the fact is Tajay Sharp is still running the 4th most routes, and it's enough to cannibalize everyone else. Whereas, we've seen in the past, A.J. Brown can absolutely dominate when given a full role and given a full share of targets. And to make your offense more explosive, especially as you continue to be middle of the road and neutral run rate, you have to get him involved more.
One, it's a major issue that the offensive line, despite the additions in the offseason, despite first-round picks, is not good. That'll be an issue throughout the entire season. The other issue is, even though we're talking about Ryan Tannehill improving this offense, they'll still be looking for another quarterback this offseason. And I truly wish this team had a good quarterback because they have a lot of weapons, a lot of talented weapons in Corey Davis, in A.J. Brown, in I'll even throw in Adam Humphries, who they gave a contract to, in Jonnu Smith.
I was about to say.
In Derrick Henry. Like, those are 5 names that can be productive players, but because of either the system or the talent that's around him, offensive line and quarterback, they're just not being able to reach that potential, and it seems like we won't see any of them truly reach it until 2020.
I don't want to hate on Humphries because he's a fine role player, but I think that is still the single most perplexing overpay of the offseason. Like, they outbid, or they were going Patriots. They were going to war with the Patriots for this guy, and now, like this last week, he played fewer than 50% of snaps. He's splitting reps with Tajay Sharp.
You think Vrabel's ego got in the way there? Like,
I don't know,
had to beat his old team.
Somehow the Pittsburgh Steelers are still involved in this playoff race. They're 3-4. The story going into the season was how will the Steelers fare without Antonio Brown, without Le'Veon Bell. Well, that took a quick turn early in the season to how will the Steelers fare from going from Ben Roethlisberger to Mason Rudolph and Daigle. For some reason, this team that has kind of played it safe for a very long time decided to not play it safe this year and trade a future first-round pick, this year's first-round pick, in a season without their quarterback and to acquire a safety or a corner, a slot corner, however you want to designate him.
Who's balling?
He's balling, but this is also a team that's 3-4 and is kind of getting lucky that they're 3-4 so far.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even care that they got back a premier defensive player, which put 8 former first-rounders on their defense. They shouldn't have done that at 2-4, no matter who the player was, unless they somehow swindled a star quarterback away, because we knew that was going to be their issue moving forward. I'm still perplexed at how Mason Rudolph was a downfield thrower, was a gunslinger in the preseason, and then came out before that Dolphins game and averaged under 4 air yards per attempt. He was Teddy Bridgewater. He was throwing sideline to sideline, not forward. But it is encouraging, and it was against the Dolphins, and it was after a bye. So perhaps they changed things. Maybe it was just the matchup. I don't know. But he averaged just under 13 air yards per attempt in that one matchup. Deontay Johnson, I texted Ian during the game because I was like, Deontay Johnson's really good, man. Like, really good. And if you recall from OTAs and training camp, they used him. They gave him packages in the first team. They sprinkled him in over Dante Moncrief because they knew, like, they liked him working out his issues. So if Mason Rudolph is now a downfield thrower suddenly, and Johnson and Juju can continue running this offense together, like, I think it is encouraging signs. However, it has to be enough to sneak them in because the defense, as we've talked about, is not the issue here.
Yeah, I was late on Johnson just because he had 2 long touchdowns early in the year that were both kind of off broken coverage, and I didn't see it that much out of him. But yeah, he looked so good. So good last week and could have been even better. Rudolph missed him for a long game.
And he has a rapport with Rudolph. Like Roethlisberger to Brown or Juju, like the rapport is with Deontay Johnson.
The one interesting thing I found this morning researching this pod is that, like, Juju is more or less the same player he was last year. He was at 2.08 yards per route run last year, 2.01 this year. He's actually averaging more yards per catch, more yards per target this year. Here's the difference: 10.4 targets per game in 2018, 6.6 targets per game in 2019. Go throw your best player the ball.
Well, and we thought heading into the year, if he was with Ben Roethlisberger, that he might lead the league in targets, and that's certainly not the case with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. No. The 3 wins for the Steelers so far this year against the Bengals, the Chargers, and the Dolphins. Like, those are nobodies.
No,
those are basically
literally nobodies. Yeah.
Not, and we haven't even mentioned those teams yet. So that's not a good sign. Now they go and face the Colts, the Rams, the Browns twice over the next 5 games. It could get even worse for the Steelers, despite y'all's optimism. Okay, the Raiders are also 3-4. That's a surprise to me. And in fact, they might look better at times than their 3-4 record might show. And a lot of it, Ian, is because of John Gruden and how he's calling this offense. Josh Jacobs looks like a top 10 running back. Darren Waller might look like a top 5 tight end at times this year. I think Derek Carr in many ways is the same Derek Carr, but that speaks to how well John Gruden has called games for him to put up points.
Here are the teams with averaging more yards per play than the Raiders this year: the Cowboys, the Chiefs, and the Vikings. That's it.
Wow.
Like, Gruden's doing that good a job, and shout out Derek Carr, like one of the quarterbacks that all of Twitter has made fun of more than just about anyone. Career highs in pretty much everything. Like, the guy's having a very good year. He's even throwing the ball downfield more. He was a 9.2% deep ball rate last season. He's up to 11 now. And that's when his number 1 stud, one of the best in the world wide receivers, got yanked away from him just a week before the season. Tyrell Williams has been hurt. I mean, again, I'm giving more credit to Gruden and the play calling, I think, than Carr. But with that said, Carr's been playing well.
Carr's been serviceable in this offense, but it is something I would imagine that Gruden still wants to just dust his hands off in the offseason.
Fair. That was my next question.
Yeah. He's doing what he can with the tools he's been given. And, of course, he gave himself those tools. I guess he was handed Derek Carr from the old regime. But either way, I would imagine it's not something they want to move forward with.
Yeah, it's well known that John Gruden always loves players on other teams more than players on his own team.
Correct.
So despite what he is doing with Derek Carr, and a lot of those vertical shots are still Derek Carr hitting his back foot and then getting rid of the football immediately, not wanting to, find that big play in chaos or make plays against disruption. That's still not who Derek Carr is. But I do wonder if it's good enough long term. Like, if the Raiders do make the playoffs, and again, they're in the hunt, 3-4. If they do make the playoffs, I think John Gruden does stick with his quarterback. But if not, but we get to this point, a lot of these, and we're going to get to a lot of these teams are going to be looking at quarterbacks. And I don't know how appealing the Raiders are in that whole mindset, especially because their defense is absolutely atrocious.
The Vegas Raiders, led by Jameis Winston.
Oh, I could see that.
Oh, my. I could actually see that, too.
I can already see that. The Los Angeles Chargers are 3-5. The Los Angeles Chargers are incredibly irrelevant at 3-5. It all comes, because this is a lost year, and I can't believe I even wrote they're still in the hunt. But Phillip Rivers, his contract is up after this year. He could be playing elsewhere, maybe Tennessee in 2020. Ian, is this era over for the LA Chargers? And that means it's an era and a window that they never really maximize despite having a talented roster.
I'd be shocked if Rivers plays it down anywhere else. I don't know. It seems like he's a Charger for life, for better or for worse.
Don't you think he's declined as well?
Yeah, it hasn't been easy for him. He just didn't have his left tackle until last week, and obviously the run game hasn't done anything. But he hasn't been as sharp as either. I do agree. It seems like the era is over. With that said, I mean, the amount of injuries they've had on defense has just been brutal. Going back to Derwin James before the season even started. So I don't want to put all the blame on Phil because, again, and they have had 3 or 4 Chargers games this year where you change one or two things, they win. But it's just what we've seen for, pretty much almost every season except last year, where they did make a pretty decent run. So, yeah, short answer, yes, I do think the era is over.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember that Philip Rivers still lives in San Diego, but takes a limo up to L.A. to practice every day while reading over his playbook in the car. He doesn't have access to do that anywhere else. So I would never, ever consider him playing anywhere else.
I always think back to the story prior to Marcus Mariota's draft of the Chargers being extremely interested and intrigued by Marcus Mariota. They worked him out. I believe they brought him in for a visit. We know that Marcus Mariota will be playing elsewhere in 2020, so it wouldn't be a surprise. Maybe Philip Rivers continues playing there, but Marcus Mariota is brought in as that heir apparent. But that's not saying too much because we don't really know where Marcus Mariota's career goes.
It just sucks because the whole Melvin Gordon thing, it's not his fault. Melvin Gordon was good, but Melvin Gordon won't be good the rest of the year because he didn't get that training camp in. Like, he had to bang himself into shape, basically. That came out wrong, and he just has been, that's why he's been bad, because he's that kind of like guy that hits, and he hasn't been able to bounce off tacklers. He's just not warmed up for the season, and you can tell.
Well, and no matter what, this team just deals with injuries at the rate more than anyone else in the league.
But that's their staff, right? That's
it's wild.
Yeah, that's not luck.
No,
at
and
this
you had Forrest Lamp, you had Melvin Ingram, you had Derwin James prior to the season, so Joey Bosa at times. Like,
medical staff's fault.
It is absolutely wild. Okay, the last team that I still consider still in it, I would like to hear if you guys believe they're still in it.
Waiting for the graphic to pop up.
The Cleveland Browns at 2-5, 3 games below 500. I mean, I thought 3 wins was going to be my cutoff point, but I felt like I was so compelled to throw the Browns in here. Ian, was I wrong to include them in this group? Are they completely out of it?
I think they're out of it. I do. It hurts to say, but I do think they're out of it. I don't know. They just got, they got Ward and Greedy back. Their defense, even without their starting cornerbacks, was, I think, playing better than we should have expected. But I just don't know what's going to turn this offense around at this point. I mean, we saw them come out of the bye week, and I don't think anything Baker did against, obviously, brutal, worst matchup possible against the Patriots. I get that. But still, like, this is, I mean, every time I watch a Thursday night game, they show that Baker pass he had against the Titans last year where he rolled out, and they're going over the next-gen stats about how insane of a throw. Like, what happened to that guy? What happened to Baker, extending plays, making balls downfield? OBJ had a higher percentage of catchable deep balls with Eli Manning last year than Baker this year. I mean, he has truly played as one of the 10-5 worst quarterbacks in the league, and I don't know how it's going to change.
It has to be revamped in the offseason. Not the team as a whole, but the coaching staff. He's just not getting any help.
So Freddie Kitchens is in over his head?
Absolutely, yeah. And I wouldn't have said that before the season. I actually thought it was quite charming to have a humble coach who just kind of was in over his head at the beginning. But the play calling last year was very good. The play calling this year has not helped Baker whatsoever. Still 31st among all starters in completion percentage under pressure. And the issue is he's under pressure at a top half rate in the league. Like, that offensive line has been terrible, and we knew that was their weakness coming in, but he's not getting any help in the play calling, shorter routes, more running the ball, despite the fact that Nick Chubb has been incredible, even with all the turmoil around him.
Playing devil's advocate here, do you think, because they've played 7 games, do you think that this team has enough individual talent? Let's say if the other pieces, because we see this in other teams, the other pieces that aren't doing well so far, namely the coaching, namely the offensive line, if they can put it together, could you see this team winning 7 games in the second half of the season, 8 games in the second half of the season?
You saying this because they have an awesome second half schedule?
No, they don't. No, they don't. And they're on a 3-game losing streak, the 49ers, the Seahawks, and the Patriots. They do have the Broncos, the Bills, the Steelers, and the Dolphins. I mean, I don't know. It's so difficult for me, and maybe this is just my own bias, and this just signifies how important offensive line talent, coaching talent is. Because there's Odell Beckham. There's Nick Chubb.
Yep.
There's Myles Garrett. There's Larry Ogunjobi. There's other really, really talented pieces. Olivia Vernon.
Just keep on going.
There's talented pieces on this team.
Yeah, of course.
Individual talents.
The coaching.
That coming together as a team is just not working. And I feel like at some point this season it will happen. But so far, through 7 games, it has not.
And they have a sweet stadium on the water. You can't let that go to waste either. All the pieces should match up, and it's not. And so the fall guy should be at the very top, and it's not going to be. So they're going to get rid of some positional coaches in the offseason and think it's going to fix everything, and it's just not going to.
Yeah. Offensive line was the biggest thing, I think you said.
All right, the teams that are out of it, we don't have to spend too much time, no offense to these teams, as we go along. The Denver Broncos, let's look at that list, by the way. The Denver Broncos are 2-6. The Jets are 1-6. The Dolphins are 0-7, and the Bengals are 0-8. Let's start off with the Broncos. I mean, the one-liner here is it's Vic Fangio's first year. The defense has started really slow, but the defense has come along. Despite Bradley Chubb being out for the year, they traded Emmanuel Sanders. Turmoil on this Broncos front, and now Joe Flacco is no longer the starter at quarterback.
I got a question. Are Von Miller's days as a truly game-changing defensive talent over? Because he's on pace to do career lows in sacks, career lows in hits. He's going to be 31 this offseason. This will be his 9th season. That's the amount of time DeMarcus Ware spent in Dallas before he became more of a just not situational, but more of a pass rushing specialist. I'm not saying he's done, but like the days of discussing Von Miller among like Aaron Donald and the truly best defensive linemen might be over.
Before we find that out, I think that Von Miller, and maybe this is just me imparting this on him, he should look at a different team. He should be one of these players that says, hey, this is an awful situation we're in with John Elway, who was one of the generational talents at quarterback that could succeed in any era
and
because of his
generational
play.
worst GM.
And is being, despite listening to this podcast, he has been awful at finding quarterbacks. Awful at finding quarterbacks, and nothing has gone on and progressed in that area that you think, hey, this is going to change. Von Miller should be that next player that says, I want out of here. I want to go to an actual legitimate situation and win.
Von Miller reminds...
Despite winning with the Broncos previously.
Yeah, but I genuinely think it was just play calling again. Vic Fangio, who this defense struggled through that first 4-5 games, the first month of the season. It was the defense as a whole, and I think it came down to Fangio's defensive play calling. And I think there's no proof of this, but I think it had something to do with him previously calling in an all-22 look over the top of the field as opposed to being on-field level and then calling from there. Von Miller just reminds me of that guy who gets paid wherever he may go, and then he just resurges. And it's like, oh yeah, we forgot. Von Miller didn't lose anything. He was strapped.
That's fair.
And Courtland Sutton, big second-year breakout. It would not be surprising, as you guys are alluding to, if Vic Fangio is not the coach of this team in 2020.
It's a shame, too, because a true second-year breakout who's now most likely going to tank the rest of the year with Brandon Allen and eventually Drew Lock under center.
And Brett Ripien.
I don't know if he makes it on the field.
All right, New York Jets 1-6. Oh my gosh.
There's another shame.
Talking about the optimism ahead of the season. It was the Cleveland Browns, and then it was the Jets based on preseason success, something to keep in mind next August, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
But the number of reports of Le'Veon Bell possibly getting dealt at the trade deadline after just signing, they traded Leonard Williams. The Jamal Adams relationship could get very rocky this offseason. Sam Darnold has found no consistency in a shortened season because of mono. This all leads to, with Joe Douglas now the general manager, and he's not going anywhere, to Adam Gase, a la Freddie Kitchens, being way over his head.
Yeah, the whole Le'Veon thing just sucks with me. I was so excited to watch him get back this year, and I know he's not putting up the numbers at all. His efficiency has been awful, but he's still PFF's number 9 running back in elusive rating, and we've seen that all year. Like, with nothing there, Le'Veon's breaking multiple tackles. He's finding a way to get, 3 or 4 yards. Obviously, it's not been enough to win games. It's the running back position. You can say that as a whole, but just one of the most fun playmakers to watch over the last few years has been, unfortunately, declawed by Adam Gase.
And it's not just him. Robbie Anderson declawed as well. And yes, the receivers had Luke Falk for a little while there, who the Jets just outright cut the moment he wasn't playing anymore. So that tells you everything they need to know. But yeah, it's just the entire offense. We knew they were coming in to this season, their weakness being their cornerbacks room. But we thought their defensive line was so strong it would get it through. And their defensive line has played well. But it's just been overshadowed by everything else. The play calling to the offense, Adam Gase, it's all his fault. But everything else has been terrible around that defensive line. Terrible.
Was playing well before they shipped Leonard Williams to their friends.
As it stands right now, the coaching staff just cannot stay. It's that simple. They haven't elevated anyone on that team. And in fact, as you said, they've declawed some players, which is not the projection that you want to happen with your coaching staff. All right, the Dolphins are 0-7. We knew this team was going to absolutely suck. They are tanking.
And rightfully so.
But they're doing it smartly.
Yeah.
They're doing it smartly. They have their first-round pick. They have the Steelers' first-round pick. You have the Houston Texans' first-round pick. They have their own second-round pick. And they have the Saints' second-round pick. The only question, if this team does go 0-16, is Brian Flores still the coach in 2020?
It seems like they have, yes, I think so. I think he's there for 3 years. I think they realize this is what you need to do. They're making like basketball-type moves. I mean, that Aqib Talib trade just taking on the salary for a 5th-round pick. Like, he's not going to play a snap in Miami, and that's fine. You know, this is something they need to do right now. They're not going to make the playoffs this year. They know that. No. I'm excited to see where Devontae Parker plays next year, though.
Of course.
I'll say that.
Of course you are. Are there any bright spots on this team?
Yeah, that they're going to get Chase Young. That's pretty exciting.
Are there any?
But other than
on
that,
the current roster, are there any bright spots? I don't think that. I mean, Xavier Howard.
Now, Xavier Howard, who we knew he was sticking with the team the moment they shut him down and put him on IR. Yeah,
I've seen the smallest bit of optimism around Mike Gesicki.
Okay, he'll be great in the second team.
Yeah, I don't think I even have enough to say. It's just Brian. So Flores, this is actually my question now. I had to find it there in my brain for a second. Brian Flores, he knows though. Like, he approved of the tanking, right? Like, he is part of the mastermind plan. Because I've heard people say also that, like, I just feel bad for him. It's like, wait, he's the one who helped out? Because that was the whole point behind the Astros tanking as well, is that they hired a coach who knew what was going on.
But at the same time, I don't think Brian Flores is going out there every Sunday and saying, hey, I want to lose this game. Right?
No.
I think they are still trying their best on the field, just from a management, roster construction, acquiring assets standpoint. This is a team that is looking towards the future and not 2019. So, I mean, I don't think Brian Flores is faking it whenever he's showing frustration on the sideline.
Right, of course.
He's still calling plays to win, but they are just putting him in a position, probably because he knows about the big picture and there are only 32 of these teams across the league, 32 of these jobs, that he knows it's an unwinnable situation.
I cannot imagine him not being the mastermind with the front office with all of this happening.
And they still play hard in moments, you know, and you know, that's a credit to him.
And he still had an impact, but, you know, they've just been injured. They're just a bad team all around. They have no talent because they're trying to get talent. Like, I would assume he keeps his job for the next 3-4 years.
So the Dolphins are 0-7. They are purposefully 0-7. The Bengals are 0-8. And I can't say the same thing.
Not purposely 0-8.
About them
I think they're good.
At all. Are they the worst team in the NFL? I mean, Andy Dalton was just benched for Ryan Finley, who was a middling quarterback at NC State, basically, and they just want to see what they have in Ryan Finley. That's an end of an era. It really is with Cincinnati, because Andy Dalton has been the starting quarterback since the 2011 draft with A.J. Green when they were drafted together. Again, I question if this is actually the worst team in the NFL, because they had that first half against the Seahawks and nothing else since.
Yeah, I don't know. I was looking at the point differential, and the Dolphins are at -161. The next closest team is the Jets at -107. But if we want to go on, like, who's playing the worst right now and moving in the second half, it could be the Bengals. I mean, my biggest issue with them is, like, what is wrong with Joe Mixon? Why are you not featuring your best offensive playmaker, especially with the A.J. Green out? I mean, last year, he played 65% of the offensive snaps in 11 of 14 games. This year, 0 games. Look, like, it'd be one thing if they're using Giovanni Bernard and, like, really kind of using him in different ways to move the offense, but Giovanni Bernard's just going into pass block pretty much, and they're just leaving Mixon on the sideline. So they're not even using their talents right, and it's, you know, we saw what LaFleur's done in Green Bay and kind of building that kind of relationship, but it's been the exact opposite since he was Zach Taylor.
You looked at their point differential. You should have looked at their rushing differential, which is a lot of fun. The Bengals have rushed for 476 yards. They have allowed 1,421 yards, nearly 1,000-yard rushing difference. Everything this team thought they did correct. They thought they could mask their offensive line via the play action, and they used it for the first few weeks, but now they rank 25th overall in play action among all quarterbacks and offenses. It's just nothing is done correctly. Ryan Finley, the highlight would be if they go back to more play action. He was 20th in the nation last year in completion percentage from play action. But either way, it's a lost year. And we talked about this before the pod. To me, it just seems ignorant has too much of a negative connotation. But it's bad if A.J. Green comes back this year, because I would imagine he doesn't make an extra cent whether he plays the rest of the year or just sits out the rest of the year. Not an extra cent.
Big picture, I don't know if the Bengals can ever be good. Like, the planets have to align.
Fair too.
Just because of the management, the ownership. It's just a different run organization than the rest of this league. And the planets did align with Carson Palmer and at times with Andy Dalton.
Yesterday, yeah.
Right, but I don't know moving forward with how the rest of the league is looking at the NFL versus how the Bengals look at the NFL, if they can actually be legitimately good.
Palmer's ACL is an analogy for this franchise. It went sideways, they went sideways.